On a night where the world seemed to hold its breath, the fog moved like ghostly fingers, curling and twisting around the towering iron gates of an abandoned garden. The air was heavy, silent, save for the faint creak of rusted hinges swaying in the wind. Beyond those gates lay a realm untouched by time, where stone figures stood frozen in eerie stillness beneath the pale glow of the moon. Every shadow in this place seemed alive. Every whisper of the wind carried secrets too dark to be spoken aloud. But this was no ordinary collection of sculptures, no mere artistry carved from stone. Look closer, and you might feel it, the sense that these statues are watching, that their lifeless eyes have stories to tell, stories trapped within them like echoes of a forgotten scream. What if these statues, these cold, lifeless forms, were not just stone, but carried the weight of human souls? What if every crack in their surface was a silent plea for freedom, and every shadow that danced across their faces was a memory of a life they could never reclaim? Tonight, we step into the shrouded mystery of the haunted sculpture garden, a place where art and the unearthly collide, and where the truth behind the beauty may be more terrifying than we can imagine. Stay with us as we unravel the chilling tales that have turned this abandoned paradise into a graveyard of secrets and stone. Now turning to the origins of this enigmatic place, one name stands at the heart of its creation: Ambrose Leclair. In the quiet solitude of the late 1800s, Ambrose emerged as a sculptor unlike any other. Known for his unnerving ability to breathe life into stone, his work fascinated and unsettled those who came to see it. His sculptures possessed an otherworldly quality, expressions so vivid, so human, that they seemed to capture the very soul of their subjects. Some said his hands were touched by genius, while others whispered that his talent defied the natural. It was Ambrose who envisioned the sculpture garden, a sprawling masterpiece he believed would immortalize his work and elevate his name to legend. Nestled far from the prying eyes of bustling cities, the garden was crafted to be a sanctuary for beauty and stillness, a place where his art could speak without interference. At its peak, the garden drew visitors from all over, people enchanted by Ambrose's creations, yet leaving with a strange sense of unease they could not explain. Over time, however, shadows began to fall over the garden's fame. Ambrose grew reclusive, his public appearances dwindling as rumors began swirling about his methods and inspirations. Some claimed they had seen flickers of movement within the statues when no one was near. Others murmured of visitors who entered the garden but never returned. By the early 1900s, the once celebrated masterpiece of artistry had become a place of dread and speculation. Locals avoided it entirely, calling it cursed. And as time wore on, nature reclaimed its hold on the land, weaving the statues into a tapestry of eerie desolation. What secrets lay behind Ambrose's stone figures, and what had driven him to vanish from the world he once sought to immortalize? Shadows of the past hint at something far darker than artistic ambition, a darkness that still lingers, waiting to be uncovered. As the next phase of the story begins, we meet Eleanor Winslow, a relentless investigative journalist whose sharp mind and unwavering determination have earned her a reputation for solving the unsolvable. Eleanor thrives on challenges where others dare not look, delving into mysteries that seem cloaked in shadows. But her latest investigation strikes closer to her heart than ever before. It begins with a cryptic letter, delivered in an envelope weathered with age and sealed with a symbol she cannot place. The letter bears no signature, only an urgent plea. The garden holds secrets that must not be forgotten. You alone can uncover the truth. This mysterious message reignites a spark of intrigue that has smoldered in Eleanor since she was a child. For you see, the haunted sculpture garden was not just an urban legend to her. It was a recurring tale her late grandmother would recount during quiet evenings, her voice tinged with both wonder and warning. Her grandmother spoke with vivid recollection of the garden, its eerie beauty, and the whispers of something far darker beneath its surface. As Eleanor holds the letter, memories flood back, the stories, the peculiar glint in her grandmother's eyes, and the sense that what she heard as bedtime tales were always meant as a cautionary truth. It is this personal connection that compels her forward, transforming the investigation into something more profound than a professional pursuit. Armed with her natural curiosity and an unyielding resolve, Eleanor begins piecing together fragments of the past that lead her toward the forgotten garden. Her courage is matched only by her sharp intellect, her ability to notice what others overlook, and her intrinsic belief that every mystery has an answer, if only one dares to seek it. And so, with the weight of her grandmother's tales driving her forward and the enigmatic letter as her guide, Eleanor embarks on a journey into the unknown, one that promises to unravel not only the secrets hidden in stone, but perhaps something far more personal. What she does not yet realize is that the garden's dark truths run deeper than she could ever imagine, waiting to intertwine with her fate. As the next challenge unfolds, Eleanor finds herself standing before the imposing gates of the long-abandoned sculpture garden. The air carries a weighty stillness, thick and suffocating, as though even the wind hesitates to disturb the mysteries hidden within. Vines twist and coil around the rusted iron bars, their creeping tendrils seemingly determined to keep intruders at bay. Yet Eleanor feels an unshakable pull, as if the garden itself beckons her forward. With each cautious step, she is struck by the eerie silence that envelops the area. No birds call, no leaves rustle, only her own footsteps crunching against the gravel path break the oppressive quiet. Beyond the gates, the statues come into view, their lifelike forms scattered across the overgrown grounds. They are exquisitely detailed, almost unnervingly so, their expressions frozen in time, and as Eleanor's sharp eyes scan their faces, an unsettling sensation creeps up her spine. It feels as though countless eyes are locked on her, unblinking and watchful. She shakes off the thought, but the feeling lingers, a subtle whisper of unease that refuses to be ignored. Her gaze is drawn to the inscription carved into the arch above the entrance. The words are weathered but still legible. "Stone never sleeps." The phrase sends a shiver through her, its haunting implication settling deep in her mind. Steeling herself, Eleanor pushes open the creaking gates, their groan echoing into the stillness as she steps inside. As she ventures further, her attention is drawn to a particular statue, a marble figure slightly cracked along its surface, as though it had once struggled against the stone encasing it. At its base lies an object partially hidden by moss and dirt. Kneeling down, Eleanor brushes it off to reveal a weathered leather journal. Its cover bears the initials, A.L., a detail that sends a flash of recognition through her. Could this belong to Ambrose Leclair, the enigmatic sculptor her grandmother spoke of with both admiration and fear? Flipping through the brittle pages, Eleanor finds sketches of statues, their hauntingly familiar faces accompanied by cryptic notes in a handwriting that feels rushed, almost frantic. Phrases leap off the page. The pact is eternal. Beauty demands a cost. Stone is a prison. Each line seems to drip with desperation and dread. The journal's contents ignite her curiosity, but they also deepen her unease. It is clear that this garden holds far more than lifeless stone. It harbors secrets that defy explanation, secrets that now entangle her own fate. With the strange journal clutched tightly, Eleanor takes a slow, steady breath. The garden's silence presses in around her, heavy with an unspoken warning. She knows she has uncovered the first thread of a much darker tapestry, one that will test both her resolve and her courage. And as she glances back at the statues one last time, their unyielding gaze seems to follow her, as though aware of the journey she has just begun. With the next phase of the journey in sight, Eleanor opens the fragile journal once more, her trembling fingers carefully turning the brittle pages. Each entry seems to pull her further into the twisted mind of Ambrose Leclair. One particular passage stands out, its ink darker and more deliberate, as though the words themselves carried an unbearable weight. The shadow came to me not in the dead of night, but in the brilliance of the afternoon sun. It spoke without voice, offering me a gift, a beauty that would defy time itself. The price was steep, yet I dared not refuse. What is one soul for perfection? What are many for eternity? Eleanor's breath catches as she reads these lines, the horrifying implication sinking in. The statues surrounding her are not mere stone, but vessels, prisons for those who once lived and breathed. The intricate lifelike details, the haunting expressions frozen in anguish or despair, all suddenly make sense. These were not creations of genius, but the cruel result of a dark pact, a transaction that exchanged human lives for artistic immortality. Each chisel mark was not just the work of a sculptor's hand, but the sealing of a fate. Ambrose's journal entries reveal his descent into obsession, his initial hesitations drowned out by the intoxicating power of his craft. Stone is impartial. Another passage reads, "It does not weep, nor does it judge, but I hear their whispers when the night falls, and their torment is my burden to bear." Eleanor's mind races as she pieces together the chilling truth. Each statue was once a soul plucked from the world and bound eternally within the cold, unyielding marble. The garden was not just a gallery, but a cemetery of sorts, its occupants forever silenced, yet visibly screaming through their lifelike forms. The words, "Stone never sleeps," echo in her thoughts, their meaning now devastatingly clear. Despite the tightening grip of dread, Eleanor feels an undeniable pull to know more, as though the trapped souls themselves were urging her to uncover the full extent of their story. Within the journal, another disturbing clue emerges, a cryptic sketch of a figure shrouded in darkness, its form vague but menacing. Scribbled beneath it are the words, "The enforcer of the pact, keeper of the debt." Eleanor realizes that the shadowy entity Ambrose mentioned was not merely a figment of his imagination. It was real, and its presence still lingered, weaving its unseen influence throughout the garden, ensuring the curse remained unbroken. The thought sends chills down her spine as she glances at the statues once more. Their stony eyes seem to hold a plea, a desperate cry for liberation that only she can hear. This revelation ignites a conflicting storm of emotions within Eleanor: fascination at the otherworldly forces at play, sorrow for the lives unjustly stolen, and fear of what lies ahead. She knows that the stories etched into these stone figures are far from over, and the deeper she delves, the more perilous her journey will become. Yet there is no turning back now. The curse of the stone souls has been laid bare before her, and the burden of their truth now rests heavily upon her shoulders. Moving forward, Eleanor's determination solidifies, even as she feels the oppressive presence of something dark watching her every step. As the next challenge unfolds, Eleanor ventures deeper into the heart of the garden, her path guided by the faintest trail of moonlight filtering through the canopy above. The air grows colder with each step, and an unnatural stillness envelops her, as though the very world is holding its breath. Her pulse quickens when she notices a faint, flickering glow emanating from behind a dense wall of ivy. Pushing the tangled vines aside, she reveals a hidden entrance to what appears to be a long-abandoned workshop. Inside, the air is thick with dust and the scent of aged stone, yet the room feels strangely alive, as if it had been recently disturbed. Eleanor's breath trembles as her eyes fall on the centerpiece of the room, a towering, unfinished statue. Its features are only partially formed, but even in its incomplete state, the craftsmanship is otherworldly, hauntingly lifelike. Suddenly, the flickering light intensifies, and a cold gust sweeps through the room, extinguishing every sound except for the faint scrape of metal on stone. She turns sharply, and there he is. Ambrose Leclair's ghostly figure materializes, hunched over a workbench, his translucent hands moving feverishly as he carves into the figure before him. His form is pale, almost grey, and flickers like a weak candle, but the intensity of his focus is blindingly vivid. Eleanor freezes, her instincts urging her to retreat, but her curiosity anchors her in place. Ambrose finally pauses, his spectral gaze lifting to meet hers. His eyes are pools of torment, filled with centuries of guilt and despair. His voice, when it comes, is hoarse and edged with sorrow. "You should not be here," he utters, the words carrying both a warning and a plea. Despite his grim demeanor, there is something deeply human in his expression, a man shackled by his own monstrous deeds. Eleanor, summoning every ounce of courage, asks him why he did it, why he condemned so many to this endless fate. Ambrose's form flickers as he hesitates, his spectral hands trembling. "I sought beauty that would stand the test of time," he begins, his voice heavy with regret. "But I was blind to the cost. I thought I could master the shadow, control it, but I was nothing more than its servant." His gaze moves to the unfinished statue before him, and his voice lowers. "They are all here because of me. Their cries haunt my every moment, yet I cannot release them. The pact binds me as much as it binds them." Eleanor presses him for answers, her desperation cutting through the oppressive air. "How do I free them? How do I break the curse?" Ambrose straightens, his form growing faintly more solid as his torment deepens. "To sever the bond would require more than courage," he murmurs. "It would require knowledge of the shadow's true name, its essence. But beware, the shadow does not forgive. It watches, it waits." His words are cryptic, and Eleanor feels the crushing weight of his warning, but she also senses a fragile glimmer of hope hidden in his riddles. As the light in the room dims, Ambrose begins to fade. Before disappearing entirely, he looks at her one last time, his expression a mixture of desperation and resolve. "Find the chamber," he whispers, barely audible. "Find it before it finds you." Then, in an instant, the workshop is plunged into darkness, and Ambrose's presence is gone, leaving Eleanor alone with the half-finished masterpiece and a storm of unanswered questions. Her heart pounds as she processes his words, the urgency of her mission now more pressing than ever. Yet in the oppressive silence, she cannot shake the feeling that she is no longer alone. that the shadow he spoke of is already aware of her presence, and the game has only just begun. With the next phase of the journey in sight, Eleanor emerges from the suffocating darkness of the workshop, her mind a whirlwind of Ambrose's cryptic warnings. Determined to uncover more, she retraces her steps through the winding garden paths until she stumbles upon a crumbling stone bench beneath an old, twisted willow tree. There she notices a small, weathered box tucked into a hollow at the tree's base, its surface etched with delicate floral patterns. Inside, she finds a bundle of fragile letters tied with a faded ribbon, along with a set of charcoal sketches. The letters, scrawled in a delicate hand, are signed by someone named Marian. Eleanor carefully unfolds the first letter, her hands trembling as she reads Marian's words. Each sentence reveals the story of a young sculptress whose talent was said to rival even Ambrose himself. Driven by a shared passion for creation, Marian and Ambrose's paths crossed, and what began as admiration soon blossomed into a deep and consuming love. Eleanor pieces together their doomed romance through the letters, her heart aching as she reads Marian's accounts of their fervent dreams to craft works that would transcend time. But as their bond grew stronger, Marian began to sense a darkness in Ambrose, a secret he would not share, but that seemed to gnaw away at his soul. Among the sketches is one of Marian herself, her face glowing with a quiet, haunting beauty. The note written on the corner of the page chills Eleanor to the bone. It reads, "My masterpiece, my eternal muse." As Eleanor delves deeper into the letters, she uncovers the horrifying truth. Marian had become increasingly tormented by Ambrose's obsession. He began to speak of a vision, a sculpture unlike anything the world had ever seen, one that would fuse art and immortality. Marian had no way of knowing the true cost of his ambition until the night she became the subject of his masterpiece. In the final letter, Marian's words are almost illegible, her distress bleeding through the faded ink. She writes of how Ambrose lured her to his private workshop with promises of unveiling his greatest work, only to betray her in the cruelest way. Tricked and helpless, she became the living essence of his masterpiece, a statue of eerie perfection, her soul bound forever in cold stone. Eleanor feels an overwhelming wave of sorrow and fury as she reads Marian's final plea for freedom, her words echoing with despair and longing for deliverance. Eleanor's gaze shifts to a nearby statue, one that stands apart from the others in the garden. Unlike the lifeless expressions of its counterparts, this statue emanates a profound sorrow, its blindfolded face tilted toward the heavens as if beseeching release. Marian's tragedy fuels Eleanor's determination. She knows now that the stories of the garden are not mere folklore, but living nightmares etched in stone. Gripping the letters tightly, she vows to bring an end to this cycle of despair, to free not just Marian, but all the tormented souls that linger in this cursed place. As the next challenge unfolds, Eleanor's footsteps carry her to a secluded corner of the garden, where the statues grow darker, their forms more jagged and unsettling. Among them stands a figure unlike any she has seen before, a statue of a man whose surface is fissured with deep, uneven cracks. The fractures run along his arms, his chest, and his anguished face, as though the stone itself had tried to tear apart under an unbearable weight. At the base of the statue, Eleanor notices faint, almost imperceptible carvings, their edges worn by time but still decipherable under her careful touch. The etchings tell a fragmented story, and one name is repeated throughout: Harold Lynch. Eleanor's curiosity is piqued as she begins to piece together Harold's fate. From what she can gather, Harold had once been a brash and fearless man, known for his fiery spirit and defiance of authority. His capture within the garden's curse was not one of quiet acceptance. Unlike the other trapped souls, Harold resisted, determined not to surrender his humanity to the cold grasp of stone. The carvings hint at his desperate attempts to escape, a struggle that earned him the unique disfigurement of his statue. Eleanor reads phrases etched into the stone, chilling in their desperation. "The stone is suffocating me," one line cries. Another reads, "I will not kneel, even in chains." Through symbols and cryptic messages, Harold's carvings tell of his audacious plan to break free. He sought to shatter his confinement, to fight the malevolent force that bound him no matter the cost. But the carvings also reveal the grim consequences of his defiance. Eleanor finds a chilling warning burned into memory as she traces the words with her fingers. It reads, "The price of resistance is worse than the stone itself." Harold's final carvings become increasingly disjointed, as though his strength had been drained by his unrelenting battle. Eleanor interprets them as a cautionary tale, an account of suffering so profound that even his fiery spirit could not endure. The fractured nature of Harold's statue now makes sense to Eleanor. Every crack is a testament to his rebellion, a silent scream frozen in time. She cannot help but be moved by his audacity, by his refusal to simply fade into the lifeless existence that had claimed so many others. And yet his fate sends a shiver through her. The scars of his defiance stand as a grim reminder of the garden's merciless power, of the shadowy entity that crushes even the fiercest spirits beneath its will. Harold's story deepens Eleanor's resolve, but also sharpens her fear. She realizes that the garden's curse is more insidious and dangerous than she had imagined, and that defying it comes at a terrible cost. As she steps away from Harold's fractured form, the whispers of his struggle seem to linger in the air, urging her to tread carefully as she presses on in her quest to free the souls. Moving forward, Eleanor's path leads her to the doorstep of a nearby estate, its sprawling grounds blanketed in thick ivy and shadows that seem to stretch unnaturally long. It is here she meets Margaret Dawes, the estate's housekeeper. Margaret appears to be a woman of quiet demeanor, her silvery hair tied back in a way that speaks of years of meticulous discipline. But there is something about her presence that feels strangely out of sync with her surroundings, an almost imperceptible tension that instantly puts Eleanor on edge. Margaret's eyes, sharp and calculating, follow Eleanor's every move with an intensity that borders on unsettling, though her words are measured and polite. Eleanor quickly notices that Margaret knows more about the garden than she initially lets on. Her responses to Eleanor's questions are carefully evasive, her tone wavering between feigned ignorance and thinly veiled warnings. "Some things are best left alone," Margaret says at one point, her voice carrying an edge of authority that makes Eleanor bristle. When pressed about Ambrose Leclair and his sculptures, Margaret grows visibly uncomfortable, her hands trembling as she adjusts the lace curtains of a nearby window. Yet, despite her reluctance to speak openly, there are moments when an unguarded expression flashes across her face, a flicker of fear, perhaps, or guilt. It is as though Margaret is caught in a silent battle with herself, torn between wanting to protect a deadly secret and yearning to unburden her soul. As the conversation unfolds, Margaret's behavior grows increasingly peculiar. She seems almost protective of the garden, of its serpentine paths and ominous statues. When Eleanor mentions Harold Lynch and his defiant carvings, Margaret's demeanor shifts abruptly, her voice rising in a rare moment of frustration. He should have known better. None of them ever learn, she mutters, almost to herself, before catching Eleanor's curious stare and hurriedly changing the subject. Her reaction strikes Eleanor as significant, a hint that Margaret may know far more about the garden's curse and the fates of those ensnared by it than she is willing to admit. Eleanor begins to suspect that Margaret's role in the saga of the haunted garden is not as straightforward as it seems. Could she be an accomplice to Ambrose's dark deeds, guarding the garden and its secrets out of loyalty or fear? Or is Margaret herself another victim of the curse, bound by forces beyond her control and desperate to keep others from suffering the same fate? The tension between these possibilities weighs heavily on Eleanor as she observes Margaret's subtle movements and listens to her cryptic remarks. It is clear that Margaret knows the stakes of meddling with the garden better than anyone, and her warnings carry an eerie sincerity. Before leaving the estate, Eleanor notices a peculiar locked chest near the fireplace. Margaret's eyes dart toward it, as though guarding its contents, and her sharp inhale when Eleanor steps closer only deepens the mystery. "That's nothing of interest to you," Margaret says, her voice now colder, more commanding. But Eleanor cannot shake the feeling that whatever lies within that chest holds answers, if not to the curse itself, then to Margaret's role in the unfolding mystery. As Eleanor steps back into the dim evening light, Margaret's parting words linger like an unspoken threat. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Miss Winslow. Be careful where it leads you." The warning, spoken with an odd mixture of concern and menace, sends a chill down Eleanor's spine. The unresolved questions surrounding Margaret only add another layer of complexity to the puzzle Eleanor is determined to solve. Who is Margaret Dawes to the garden? A protector, a prisoner, or something else entirely? As the evening darkens around her, Eleanor knows that Margaret's secrets cannot remain hidden for long, and every clue uncovered brings her closer to the heart of the garden's haunting truth. With the next phase of the journey in sight, Eleanor feels the weight of Margaret's cryptic warnings pressing upon her as she retraces her steps to the ominous garden. The statues seem more menacing under the pale glow of the rising moon, their hollow gazes following her every move. Determined to uncover the root of the garden's curse, she recalls a peculiar detail from Ambrose's journal, an unfinished chapter in his notes that hinted at a hidden place beneath the grounds. Fueled by an unshakable intuition, Eleanor begins to search for signs, her flashlight revealing subtle etchings along the base of a colossal statue near the center of the garden. The markings, faint and weathered by time, appear to form a riddle. Where shadows kneel, truth takes root. Piecing together the cryptic clue, Eleanor realizes the answer lies in a secluded part of the garden where the statues form a half circle, their stone figures eerily bowed as if in penance. It is here she notices an uneven patch of earth, the brittle grass giving way to something more solid beneath her feet. Digging with trembling hands, Eleanor uncovers a latch hidden under the soil, its rusted surface betraying its age. With a deep breath, she pulls it open to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. The air is thick and cold as she descends, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. At the bottom, Eleanor finds herself in a vast underground chamber. The walls are lined with grotesque carvings, faces frozen in terror, hands reaching out as though pleading for salvation. At the center of the room stands Ambrose's final, incomplete creation. This statue, unlike the others, is unmistakably a self-portrait. Its features are painstakingly precise, yet its expression is one of anguish and torment. Around its base, an otherworldly mist swirls, almost alive in its movements, and Eleanor feels an overwhelming presence, an unnatural force that seems to thrive on despair. It is then that she hears it, a voice not of this world, but from the shadows themselves, resonating with a chilling blend of malice and sorrow. The spirit Ambrose had bargained with reveals itself, its form an ever-shifting silhouette that defies human comprehension. It speaks to Eleanor, taunting her with the knowledge that it was Ambrose's ambition that brought it into being, a pact forged in desperation to breathe life into lifeless stone. In exchange for this gift, Ambrose had surrendered countless souls, each one now trapped for eternity within the statues above. The revelation sends a shiver through Eleanor. She understands now why the garden feels alive, why each statue emanates an aura of pain. These are not mere works of art, but prisons, their beauty a cruel facade for suffering beyond measure. As the spirit circles her, its voice thick with menace, it makes her an offer, a choice. It promises to spare her from the same fate, to let her leave unscathed, if only she abandons her quest and leaves the souls to their torment. But another path lies before her, fraught with peril. Eleanor could attempt to break the curse, to destroy the spirit's hold over the garden, though it would undoubtedly put her life at risk. Standing in the flickering light of her flashlight, Eleanor is consumed by the gravity of this revelation. She feels the eyes of the unfinished statue upon her, its expression of despair reflecting the inner turmoil Ambrose must have faced in his final moments. The fragments of the mystery have fallen into place, but the decision that lies ahead is hers alone. Would she walk away, leaving the garden's tragic victims to their eternal fate, or would she confront the malevolent force that had twisted their lives into an endless nightmare? Eleanor's resolve hardens as the chamber seems to close in around her, every shadow waiting, every second heavier than the last. As the next challenge unfolds, Eleanor takes a trembling step toward the swirling mist encircling the unfinished statue. The malevolent spirit's form looms closer, its voice a sinister whisper that crescendos into a mocking laugh. The chamber fills with an eerie resonance, and above her, faint but unmistakable echoes rise a chorus of anguished voices, calling out from the statues in the garden above. Their cries are not of rage, but of sorrow, pleading for release. The oppressive weight of their despair fuels Eleanor's resolve as she clutches Ambrose's journal to her chest, its brittle pages trembling in her grasp. Drawing on the scattered fragments of knowledge she has pieced together, she takes a calculated risk, speaking directly to the entity. "You thrive on fear, on regret," she says, her voice steadier than she feels. But Ambrose's final creation, his unfinished work, it stands incomplete because he defied you. He tried to reclaim what you took, didn't he? Her words seem to strike a nerve. The shadowy form recoils slightly, its edges shifting violently as if caught in a storm. Taking this as a sign, Eleanor presses on, flipping through the journal until she finds the passage she had instinctively marked earlier, a cryptic annotation paired with a crude sketch of the statue before her. The note reads, "The root of his power is the fear of the forgotten. Break the cycle, shatter the mirror. These words fuel her conviction as the answer begins to crystallize in her mind. The spirit, sensing her intent, lashes out. The mist coalesces into tendrils that lash toward Eleanor, hissing through the air like living serpents. She ducks and rolls, narrowly avoiding the attack, her flashlight clattering to the stone floor and casting wild beams of light that dance across the grotesque carvings lining the walls. Suddenly, the chamber itself seems to react to the spirit's fury. The faces carved into the walls twist and shift as though alive, their expressions growing more anguished with each passing moment. The ground trembles beneath her feet as the voice of the entity grows louder, a guttural roar that shakes her very core. But Eleanor refuses to falter. She recalls the hidden letters she unearthed, Marian's longing words, Harold's carvings of defiance, and realizes the key to breaking the spirit's hold lies not just in defiance, but in hope and unity. With a surge of determination, she tears a page from the journal, crumples it into a makeshift torch, and ignites it with a trembling hand. The flame flickers weakly at first, but as she raises it high, the light seems to push back the encroaching darkness. The spirit screeches, its form contorting in visible agony as it retreats momentarily, providing Eleanor the chance to act. Turning to the unfinished statue, Eleanor recalls Ambrose's tormented expression, frozen in stone. With all her strength, she drives the base of the makeshift torch into the shallow etchings Ambrose had carved around the statue's feet. The flame flares brilliantly, as though feeding on an unseen force. The chamber erupts with sound, the hollow voices of the trapped souls above grow louder, no longer pleading but rising in a collective cry of liberation. The carvings on the walls begin to crack and crumble, the anguished faces disintegrating into dust as if their pain is finally being released. The spirit, now writhing in desperation, lets out a deafening roar. "You dare defy me," it bellows, its voice shaking the chamber. Eleanor meets the shapeless form's gaze, or what she imagines to be a gaze, with unyielding determination. "You thrive on despair, but you are nothing without it," she says, her voice cutting through the chaos. "And you will have no power here anymore." With those final words, she seizes the base of the statue and shoves it with everything she has. It topples with a thunderous crash, shattering into countless pieces that seem to dissolve into the mist itself. A violent ripple courses through the chamber, and for a moment it feels as though the world is tearing apart. But then a profound silence falls. The mist dissipates entirely, and the oppressive presence vanishes as if it had never been. The statues above no longer echo with sorrow. The garden is silent, but it is a peaceful silence, free of the weight that once lingered. Eleanor collapses to her knees, exhausted yet triumphant, the broken remnants of Ambrose's final creation lying scattered around her. She knows the garden will never be the same, but for the first time, it feels as though it might finally rest. As the sun rises on the next chapter, the haunted sculpture garden stands transformed under the soft glow of morning light. The once ominous statues, harbingers of sorrow and despair, now lie crumbled into fragments upon the earth, their jagged remains slowly being claimed by the overgrowth of nature. Where oppressive silence once reigned, the garden now breathes a quiet peace, as if the land itself sighs in relief. Eleanor stands in the center of this stillness, her gaze sweeping over the space that has consumed her thoughts and fears for so long. The air feels lighter, almost fragile, as though the weight of centuries has finally been lifted. She clutches Ambrose's journal one last time before setting it gently on a weathered pedestal. a monument to the strange yet redemptive journey she has undertaken. Reflecting on the haunting tale of Ambrose Leclair and the souls trapped within his creations, Eleanor cannot help but feel a bittersweet ache. The garden is free, yes, but the stories of those who suffered here, their love, defiance, and longing will forever linger on the edges of her memory. From Marian's tragic love to Harold's desperate rebellion, each fractured statue told a story worth remembering. Gazing at the verdant vines creeping over the remnants, Eleanor wonders about the price of ambition and the dangers of desires that reach too far. Was Ambrose a villain, or simply a man ensnared by his own dreams? The answer, like the garden itself, may never be fully clear. As Eleanor turns to leave, she senses a quiet shift in the air, almost imperceptible, like a fleeting whisper carried on the wind. It is not a cry, nor a plea, but something softer, a hint of gratitude, perhaps, or an echo of farewell. She smiles faintly, the weight of the past giving way to the promise of moving forward. The path out of the garden is no longer shrouded in mist, and as she steps beyond its gates, she carries not only the memories of its mysteries, but also the wisdom of its lessons. Now, as this chapter draws to a close, we are left with a garden no longer haunted, and a woman forever changed. But as the stories of the past fade into the soil, one question lingers. What other secrets does the world still hold, waiting in silence to be uncovered? Perhaps the echoes of the past are never truly gone, but rather they find a way to ripple into the present, much like the tales of this forgotten place. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the haunted sculpture garden. If you enjoyed unraveling this tale of mystery and redemption with us, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Until next time, may your dreams be free of shadows and your nights full of wonder.